Innuendo, Book 5 of the Todd Mills Mystery Series. Author R.D. Zimmerman. Publisher Scribble Pub Press, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Narrator Eric Aust. Chapter 11. Wanting to see if anything new had come in, Rawlings and Neil Foster met the guys on dog watch. Myers and Erickson, not long after they came off their shift, they gathered at a booth at Perkins on Lake Street, where each of them drank coffee like water and ate breakfasts that were massive enough for two or even three. Discussing the murder of Andrew Lyman took all of about 10 minutes, for there was nothing new, at least not in the few hours that Rawlings and Foster had crept away to sleep. Even Kathy Dietrich's formal statement, which Myers and Erickson had taken at the beginning of their shift, had revealed nothing significant about the way in which she discovered the body. Immediately afterward, Foster headed over to the medical examiner's to take another look at the body, and Rawlings went to the downtown station in City Hall. Rawlings parked his silver Taurus alongside the huge red granite structure, the walls of which were as thick as a castle, and then passed through the arched entrance on 4th Street. Entering the dimly lit lobby, he made his way past the large marble statue of Neptune and the small bust of Brian Coyley, the city councilman, who had died of AIDS. Proceeding up the massive marble staircase, went smooth with age. Rawlings headed to the 2nd floor, where a receptionist behind a bulletproof window buzzed him into the criminal investigation division. Everything here had been recently renovated, and the only hint that this was a turn-of-the-century building was the soaring ceilings and the huge windows, which were now covered with copper-colored mini blinds. While the homicide division used to be a true ballroom with a bunch of old desks in one large space and everyone shouting and moving about it, now more resembled a corporate office at the Pillsbury Company. The mauve carpet with its square pattern ran throughout. The cubicles, designed for 2 investigators, each were lined up in neat rows along the windows, and the modern desk chairs were not only ergonomic, but their mauve fabric matched the carpeting. Rawlings kind of hated it, particularly since there was no privacy. It didn't matter whether you were calling a suspect or a lover. Everyone could hear everything. It was that tranquil, that professional looking. The only indication of what went on here was a hanging clipboard that was packed full of arrest bulletins and the occasional gun belt draped over the back of a chair, neither of which you'd ever find at the Doughboys. Rawlings went directly to his cubicle, a long rectangular space with 2 desks and 1 computer, which he shared with Foster. Without taking off his brown leather jacket, Rawlings sat down at the outer desk, and then leaned forward and let out a distinct huff of air. No doubt about it, he thought as he bent forward and bowed his head into his hands. This was all fucked up. That Andrew was dead was unbelievable. What was worse was that now he himself could be linked. Leaning back, Rawlings glanced around the corner of the cubicle and saw no one. He then reached into the pocket of his jacket and pulled out the small spiral notebook. Opening the diary, he glanced at the first few pages, each one filled with Andrew's tight, precise handwriting, and each paragraph filled with details of his exploits. Seeing nothing of particular concern, Rawlings thumbed on, learning more than he actually cared to about someone else's life. Flipping toward the end, Rawlings saw his own name. Shit. He read a couple of more pages, which described everything, then pulled open his file drawer, found a file marked for receipts, and dropped the small notebook in the back. Jesus Christ. How the hell had he gotten into this mess? Just what the hell had he been thinking? He shook his head and forced himself to press on, for quite simply he had massive amounts of work to do. While last night he'd gone home to catch a few hours sleep, more often than not on a new case, Rawlings simply stayed up, working through the night, looking at every angle, examining each and every piece of evidence. Every homicide investigator worth shit knew it, and knew it well. If a suspect didn't surface in the first 24 hours, your chances of identifying one began to plummet as fast as a boulder dropped in a lake. As it was, Rawlings had stayed at the scene of Andrew Lyman's murder for over 5 hours. He'd been in their apartment until the Bureau of Investigation team filmed every square inch and sucked up every single fiber. and hair. And then he'd watched in near shock as the medical examiner loaded Andrew's beautiful young body into a vinyl bag, zipped him up, and rolled him away. He then checked with CAPRS and the local police station, neither of which had any logged complaints against Andrew Lyman or record of disturbance for this particular address. Moving on, Rawlings had interviewed several other residents, searched unsuccessfully for any additional witnesses, then finally taken the license plate numbers for 8 cars parked in the rear of the building. As a matter of fact, he now thought the registration checks on those vehicles should already be complete. So where was he going to start today? First, of course, he wanted to read through the statement of the young woman who had found Andrew's body. Then he'd contact forensics, see if there were any early results, perhaps any hair samples. And when he wondered, was the autopsy scheduled? He doubted that they'd learn anything new on the manner of death. Andrew had obviously been killed by a large, sharp object slashed across his neck, and Rawlings was 90% positive that it had happened right there in Andrew's own bed. But he was curious to see if there was any drugs in Andrew's blood. That was the one thing he didn't know about Andrew, whether or not he did any kind of dope. And of course, he had to find out who Andrew had been hanging out with at the Domain of Queers. A list, right, he thought, opening his top drawer and pulling out a half-used pad. Just do what you always do, make a list and go down it nice and methodically. He was just taking out a pen when his phone rang. He yawned as he reached for the receiver. Could it be Todd? A homicide. This is Sergeant Rawlings. Hi, said a hesitant male voice. I'm trying to find the detective in charge of the murder of that kid. Someone put me through to you. Have I reached the right person? Rawlings was immediately awake. A tip call? Yes, he replied. That's my case. Who's calling? I don't think that's really important. I mean, I'd rather not say. I just can't get involved. Okay, maybe he'd get the name later. The important thing was not losing him, whoever he was. In as even a voice as he could, Rawlings asked, Is there something you'd like to tell me? Do you have any information that might be helpful to us? That's just the thing. I'm not really sure. You see, I was down at Lake Harriet last night, and I saw something kind of strange. It didn't really click until I read the paper this morning. When I read about that kid getting killed. What'd you see? Well, there was this guy. He threw something in the lake. I couldn't see what it was, but it looked like a piece of metal. I mean, I don't even know if it was a gun or a tin can, but it was just kind of weird. Where exactly was this? You know where the rose gardens are? I was near there in some woods. I mean, this guy, he couldn't see me. Was Rawlings understanding correctly? The words, just to the west of the rose gardens was a known cruising area. So had this guy been in there hunting for anonymous sex and seen something? Quite possibly. Rawlings thought for a quick moment. How in the hell was he going to get it out of him? Was his best chance being as direct as possible? Perhaps, but then again, maybe not. If he was down in those woods, he could easily be a closet case, and chances were that if Rawlings came right out and asked him if he was cruising, he'd hang up. A little information this guy didn't mind giving, but outing himself was, as they said in Russian, an entirely different opera. So how could he do this in the least threatening way? About what time was this? Asked Rawlings. A little after 11. And you were down in the woods by the rose gardens? Yeah. I was down there with my camera. And this guy, he was where? Down by the lake? Exactly. There's a small beach. He was standing down there. I see. This might be very helpful to us. I appreciate your calling. Okay, thought Rawlings. He'd just simply lay out his own cards. I'm gay, which is why I'm particularly interested in this case. You see, the young man who was murdered was also gay. He was. Yes, most definitely. Oh, God. Rawlings could hear it, the trepidation quivering in this guy's voice. Which meant what? Listen, began Rawlings. I don't want to get into anything too personal, but I'm sorry, but I can't tell you my name. Oh, no, of course not. Of course you don't have to. And if you're trying to trace this call, it won't work. he said matter-of-factly. I'm not at home. Please, you don't have anything to worry about. I just wanted to tell you about something that might be important, and we appreciate. I was down there, said the tip caller quickly, and I saw this guy who was completely bald throw something in the lake. And then he turned around and stuffed something in a garbage can, and then he got in his car, a white Saab convertible with a black roof, and took off. That's all. That's wonderful. We really do appreciate it. Listen, I gotta go. Wait, don't hang up. You don't understand. Wait. Ah, shit, thought Rawlings, hearing the click on the other end. He lost him. Shit. He held the receiver to his ear for a long moment, then slowly put it down, cursing himself for having come on too strongly. He'd been out of the closet for so long that he'd forgotten how frightened and how threatened people could be by their own sexuality, or how dangerous it could be for someone. Perhaps the tip caller was married and had kids, or perhaps he was worried about work, or maybe he was in the military. But Rawlings was quite sure of one thing. That guy hadn't been down in the woods taking pictures of birds or the moon. For Christ's sake, it had been going on midnight, and it was a cloudy night. No, surely the caller had been tricking. Surely he'd gone down there for what he couldn't or dared not get elsewhere. Sexual contact with another man. Maybe he'd had sex with this bald guy. Maybe not. Regardless, he'd witnessed something he wasn't supposed to have. Angry at himself for having lost the tipster, Rawlings sat there shaking his head, yet knowing what he had to do next. It might be nothing, but he certainly couldn't ignore it. Right, time to go fishing. A Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.